For political journalists, elections are basically the playoffs. Last night, Doug Ford won the cup, but there's still plenty to reflect on from the results and what comes next. With us on that in Ontario's capital city, Robert Benzie, Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Sabrina Nanji, journalist and founder of the Queen's Park Observer. Welcome all.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
I know you guys had really long nights, so we're going to start off actually with a roll-in from this morning of Premier Doug Ford after winning the election.
Today, with the votes counted, I'm here speaking to you once again as your Premier. And I want you to know I want you to know I'll wake up every single day and go to work for all Ontarians. Whether you're a longtime supporter, voted PC for the first time, or cast your ballot for any other party. Now is the time to unite. Now is the time to build Ontario. To Andrea, Stephen, and Mike, as well as every single person who put their name on the ballot. You made our democracy stronger, and I want to thank you.
All right, something important from that clip that he didn't do last night was he thanked both Stephen Del Duca and Andrea Horwath in his speech. But I want to get your first impressions. Sabrina, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts from the night and this morning, waking up to not really much change?
Yeah, I think we've been talking that this has been a bit of a sleepy campaign, but obviously election night was relatively explosive then. You know, we had 2 leadership resignations. Doug Ford won a resounding majority with 83 seats. We can dig into all the juicy bits there, but you know, I think I'm reading between the lines of what Ford said. You know, obviously we're all waiting for a budget now and a cabinet swearing in. I don't think there's going to be any major rush on that, maybe later on in the summer. But he seemed to kind of walk back the promise that it was going to be this exact same budget as we saw, you know, obviously, you know, the re-election platform that the PCs tabled in the spring kind of served as their budget, vice versa. But of course, technically speaking, it couldn't have been the exact same because partway through the campaign, they promised this unbudgeted raise in ODSP. And I think that a lot of people are going to be looking at Doug Ford and making sure that he's the changed Doug Ford that he has been. Like, don't forget, in the first year of his 2018 mandate, he made all these super unpopular cuts, had to demote his finance minister. And I think a lot of people are worried about that, you know, and then in the maybe 6 months or so before the campaign, they kind of changed tune, learned their lessons, you know, started talking about big spending projects. And so, you know, I think a lot of people are worried that Doug Ford might benefit from a weakened opposition as those parties are busy with choosing their new leaders. But, you know, time will tell if this is really the new Doug Ford.
All right, Robert, I'll get your take on that. First impressions.
I mean, I was struck by the new voter coalition that the Tories have built under Mr. Ford. The first Conservative government that I covered was under Mike Harris, and it was decidedly an anti-union government in many ways, mostly with teachers' unions and public sector unions, but some private sector unions part of them as well. But Mr. Ford, we've called it at the Star the big blue collar machine that he has built, which is appealing to factory workers, trades people, things like that. And then even this morning, Dan, he was talking about the importance of the nurses and teachers and how he's going to make changes to Bill 124, which of course is the wage cap bill that keeps the raises at 1%. So it struck me that he's being a lot more conciliatory, and I think it's because he's understanding that who elected him. He's not really elected by Bay Street. He's elected by more ordinary folks. Now, this is a thing about him. I mean, Mr. Ford wins some ridings that the Tories wouldn't win under another leader, and I think that's what's kind of bedeviling for the New Democrats and the Liberals. They used to count on a lot of union support. The Liberals did when they were in office for 15 straight years. The New Democrats have traditionally been very close to organized labor. That seems to have changed a little bit. Sure, Andrea Horwath still had a lot of public sector union support and teachers unions and so on. And Del Duca had, Stephen Del Duca, the Liberal leader, had some teachers union support, but nothing like it's not like it used to be. So I think those parties are going to have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how they can appeal to a broad swath of people that aren't maybe that ideological. I don't think Mr. Ford is particularly ideological. He is a populist. He wants to be loved. He wants to be liked. He wants to be reelected. So he looks at what's popular and what the polls are saying, and he moves in that direction, which sounds a lot like some Liberal governments that we've seen in this country over the years that aren't ideologically driven.
All right, let's talk seat counts. The Conservatives gained 16 seats, the NDP lost 7, and the Liberals gained 1, and the Greens, of course, maintained their 1 seat. Sabrina, the NDP lost seats to the PCs and not to the Liberals. Did anyone see that coming? Was that reflected in the polls as well?
Well, if you talk to anyone in the Conservative war room, I mean, yeah, they definitely were banking on Windsor, and they did it. You know, they picked up Essex and Windsor-Tecumseh, where obviously, you know, those ridings were a little bit more in play, traditional NDP territory, but 2 incumbents didn't run again, Taras Nadishak and Percy Hatfield, you know, and so obviously incumbents get a leg up on the ticket. There's name recognition. They can run on their record. But the Conservatives were really pushing hard in those ridings. I think Ford even said it in question period at one point, you know, like, we're coming for you to Taras Nadishak. And, you know, they had nominated their candidates there months before others. So, like, that gave their candidates time to go door knock, you know, really, like, push a hard ground game. I think more surprising to me was probably the North. They picked up Thunder Bay Atikokan, a historic win for the Conservatives. Again, traditionally NDP turf, and also Timmins too, you know, where longtime incumbent NDPer Gilles Bisson lost his seat. I think, you know, to Benzie's point, there is a lot of, you know, a rift maybe in the unions. And obviously, you know, it was a big deal for Ford to pick up some support from organized labor, especially unions that would typically maybe support the Liberals, construction unions, I'm thinking. But there is like this interesting swing of blue collar voters who are more likely to switch between NDP and Conservative. And I think that was something that was significant in the Southwest region for sure.
All right, I want to talk about another storyline that I think has been sort of overshadowing the election here is voter turnout. One of the lowest rather in Ontario's history. Robert, does this taint the PC victory at all?
Well, I mean, it is what it is, Dan. Kathleen Wynne, there was 48% voter turnout in 2014. Did that taint her majority win with 38 point whatever percent she had that year? No, I mean, people had the chance to vote, and they should have gone and voted. I mean, it's not a great look for Elections Ontario. I mean, to have that turnout that low, it's kind of on them. It's on the parties as well, I suppose. But I think I see a lot of talk this morning from academics and others blaming the media, blaming the coverage, blaming the political parties, blaming the leaders. But I mean, sometimes people are complacent because they don't feel anything is wrong, and so they just said, well, you know what, I'm not going to bother to vote because I thought I don't have a huge issue with them. In 2018, we had 57% voter turnout, and that was a change election to get rid of Doug Ford. So 4 years from now, if it's a change election and it's throw the bums out, we could see an increase again, like to those previous levels. I think this one is complicated for lots of reasons. The pandemic has made people kind of insane, and some people just didn't bother. They've kind of withdrawn into themselves. I guess they'd rather spend their night on Twitter than complaining about how awful the world is than actually going out and doing anything to change it by voting. But it's depressing. I mean, there were 7,000 polling stations in 124 ridings, and there weren't lineups at most of them. And that's not a good look for Ontario. So I think we as a society have to ask ourselves why that is.
All right, Sabrina, I'm hoping you can break this down for me. We've been talking a lot in this election, post-election, about seat efficiency. The Liberals only won 8 seats, but their voter turnout was almost identical to the NDP at about 24%. How is this possible?
Yeah, I think this might spark a lot of conversations about electoral reform and our system, but that kind of seems to happen a lot too. So I don't know if it will really go anywhere. And of course, you know, the powers that be aren't exactly willing to change the system that got them to the top spot there. But, you know, I think, of course, you know, just a devastating night for the Liberals. didn't get party status. I guess for close Queen's Park watchers would know that they did get enough to get the former threshold for party status, which was 8 seats. And obviously, you know, being recognized in the House as an official party, as they say, comes with a lot of added benefits. Of course, you know, you get more resources, there's more money to hire research staff, help you just kind of do your legislative duties. And obviously, you know, that went a long way for the NDP. Of course, I think they couldn't really turn it out, use those resources effectively enough to grow their opposition. Obviously, we saw last night, hindsight is 2020, but you know, these parties will still get a per vote subsidy. So that's this quarterly taxpayer funded subsidy that all the parties get once you meet a certain threshold of the vote, and they will use that, and that will go a long way. But certainly, I think this is going to have a lot of interesting debates, especially even for the Greens too, about, you know, if our system is really cutting it versus something like proportional representation.
All right, I want to talk about resignations. One that maybe we all saw coming, one that maybe we didn't think. It was kind of up in the air. But we'll start with Andrea Horwath. Robert, she announced her resignation last night. There's a lot of questions about who will be stepping up. Who do you think will lead the NDP next?
Well, I mean, we've already written story today about who some of the names that are being bandied about. Marit Stiles, the Davenport MPP, very effective opposition MPP. She's former president of the federal New Democrats. She's formidable. Catherine Fife from Waterloo, another top-notch performer. Dolly Begum from Scarborough Southwest. Wayne Gates from Niagara Falls. There's no shortage of names that are swirling around because, and Joel Harden from Ottawa, Ottawa Centre. And I think it's because, to Sabrina's point, it's a prize. You're going to be the leader of the official opposition. It comes with a nice pay packet of about $180,000 a year and the perks of that office. And you could be the government in waiting, because we know that Ontarians tend to give premiers a 2 kicks at the can. So there's a good chance that next time to 2026 could actually be a change election. So if you're, I'm going to be watching the people jockeying for that race, because that's going to be a really lively contest. Andrea Horwath has been leader since 2009. She took the party from the place where basically the Liberals are now, frankly, to official opposition status. But, you know, Dan, she should have probably quit in 2018 when she'd taken them to the precipice at 40 seats, because they would have probably been better positioned last night than they were. Sometimes it's better to leave a party 5 minutes too early, or 4 minutes too early, or 5 minutes too early than 4 years too late, you know?
I do want to get your take. You know, you've been following, you know, the legislature for quite some time, and I'm curious, her speech, we saw a different side of her in that speech, an emotional one. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously an upsetting thing for her, because she has rebuilt that party. I mean, I think I understood where she was coming from. On a human level, you see that the hard work that these folks do. And it must have been distressing after 4 years of sitting across from Doug Ford, who she doesn't think very highly of, obviously, otherwise she wouldn't have been running against him, to see him romp to victory, especially winning so many NDP seats. You know, what did they win? 9 NDP or 8 NDP held seats? I mean, that's a big chunk of support to lose. And then on the other side, Stephen Del Duca, who I've known for very many years since he was a political staffer, bright guy, capable guy. And watching his speech, Jan, I saw a side of him that you don't often see. I mean, he was deeply hurt by what happened, and I understand that. I'd seen him the day before, and he had said he was going to stay no matter what happened in his own riding on Friday or on Thursday. And then, you know, the reality was he just couldn't stick around if they weren't in official party status of 12 seats. So they're now looking for a leader, and they're, unlike the NDP leadership, it's not going to be as many people who are interested, because it's kind of not a poison chalice, but it's not exactly a plum. They don't have official status in the House, so they're going to be treated as 8 independent MPPs. So that's going to be tough. Sabrina,
I want to get your take on that. You know, unlike the NDP, they don't have a number of candidates waiting in the wings. Who do you think might be the next Liberal leader? And more importantly, who would want the job?
Yeah, this one's a little bit different than the NDP, right? I think what I was hearing last night from Liberals was that the absolute lowest bar, getting those 12 seats for recognized status, was what Del Duca could do. I think some were even willing to keep him around. There's an automatic leadership review in the party post-election. Like if he had done that, he didn't manage to hold on to his seat. He didn't manage to get official opposition. They were kind of willing to forgive that, but it was just like a really brutal showing for them, especially, ridings that they thought they had in the bag, St. Paul's, for instance. But there are already some rumors about who would take, his spot potentially. I think in the last leadership race for the Liberals, it wasn't that long ago in 2020, Del Duca kind of won that handily. Like it wasn't even close with the others. And so there has been some buzz about Mitzi Hunter, but, she placed far behind in the last leadership race there. So I don't know if she would make another kick at the can. I'm also hearing Mary Margaret McMahon, who won in Beaches East York, managed to take that seat from the NDP. Some rumors that I've been hearing is that if she did run, she might get endorsed by Del Duca's team, and one Liberal insider said that would be poison to her. I think there's a lot of hard feelings about how last night went in that party, especially. And of course, elections are emotional things. Like we as reporters have been watching it. It's like super exciting for us. And I can't imagine being an actual partisan person, like how intense it is. So a lot of buzz. I think, as for Horwath and Del Duca's future, they might have, both of them might have municipal bids. The timing kind of works out where they could run for their city councils. Horwath kind of opened the door to that this week. And the same time, Mauricio Bevilacqua, the mayor of Vaughan, said he won't be running again. So, I think there's going to be a lot of questions for Del Duca if he'll try and run again there.
All right. I want to move into some ridings. Robert, Doug Downey, the former Attorney General, narrowly held on to his seat last night. Do you think that means the position of Attorney General is now up for grabs?
Well, I mean, in the sense that they do have others who could be Attorney General. Todd McCarthy, who was elected last night in Durham, is one name that's been mentioned. But Doug Downey's been a pretty effective Attorney General, certainly better than his predecessor, Caroline Mulroney, who struggled in that role, frankly. You're speaking about the Liberal race, Jan. Jeff Lehman, who was the Liberal candidate against Doug Downey as the mayor of Barrie. Right. It was a close one, and he was if he had won last night, I would have put him as the front runner to be the next Liberal leader, because he's been bandied about in that role before. Now, having lost to the Attorney General, I doubt that he'd be interested anymore. But you never know. Never say never in politics. There are lots of second acts in politics. It's not like F. Scott Fitzgerald said about American lives. But I think the fact that it was such a close race is not going to hurt Mr. Downey's chances for being back in cabinet, because he was actually one of the more effective ministers. You remember when the government was doing that boneheaded move about having police spot checks and closing the playgrounds to limit COVID-19 back in April 2021, last April, a year and a month ago. Doug Downey was one of the voices of reason at the cabinet table, who said, "Are we sure we want to do this?" And I think Doug Ford appreciated that counsel, and especially since events proved Mr. Downey to be correct.
All right, I want to talk about the Mike and Matt show. Unfortunately, Sabrina, that did not come to be. Mike Schreiner, though, maintained his seat, but they were hoping to get some love in Perry Muskoka. Again, a close race, but they were going up against a well-known municipal politician there. Are the Greens a viable party when they can only get one person elected?
Look, I think unlike what we saw with the NDP and the Liberals, the Greens can still call last night a victory for them. I believe that Mike Schreiner won Guelph, by the biggest margin of last night. Of course, there's still, it's just early numbers right now, but that's something to be proud about for sure. And of course, he had made history in 2018 by being the first ever Green MPP elected. So holding on to that seat was a big victory for him. Perry Muskoka, we were saying about Andrea Horwath, the fourth time is not the charm, and so for Matt Richter over there, the fifth time was not the charm. It was his fifth run, but he ended up kind of doubling his vote share there. He got about 20% in the last round in 2018. He got about 40% this time around, and so I think, they're still feeling pretty good, the Greens, but yeah, their chances of forming government are virtually nil, of course, at this point. We always like to say about Mike Schreiner that he punches above his weight as, the sole Green there, as an opposition member who holds the government accountable. And I think that we'll continue to see that in the House.
It'll be interesting. Matt Richter, of course, that was, I believe, his 5th attempt, so maybe he's going for 6. Now that the election is over, I don't want to jump 4 years from now. I want to focus and turn on, now that we've gone from campaigning, let's go into governing. Are there any things that you guys are going to be keeping your eyes on? Are there any stories that you anticipate that will be unfolding? Robert, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be watching for the cost of living. Affordability issues were big in this election, as much as anything was big. I'm going to be watching for Premier Ford to keep some of these campaign promises. He made a lot of very expensive promises. He's already the biggest spending premier in the history of Ontario. The reintroduced budget later this year will probably be more than $200 billion. It was $198.6 billion on April 28th. I think it's going to be higher by the time it's actually tabled again. And the deficit might be, exceed $20 billion, and it was $19.9 billion before. So he's a big spender, and he's going to have to keep some of those promises, because if 4 years from now, opposition leaders are standing in front of empty fields saying Doug Ford promised a hospital here, or Doug Ford promised a highway here, or Doug Ford promised a subway here, and nothing has happened, people are going to remember that, and I think his team is mindful of that. They know that they have made a lot of promises to a lot of people, and they have been in many ways all things to all people, and almost everything except, I would argue, climate change. That was really their one most vulnerable issue, and for whatever reason it didn't hurt them. But they have made a lot of promises, and keeping those promises will be interesting to see. With inflation at 7%, boy, it's going to be expensive and it's going to be tricky.
Sabrina, I got 30 seconds. What will you be keeping your eyes on?
Yeah, I'm with Benzie. I'll be seeing if they can really follow through on some of these promises. Now the work of governing begins. They've got this huge majority mandate. What are they going to do with it? Obviously, the opposition parties are going to be busy for the next little bit with picking their own leaders. That could, take years sometimes. And so I think, really keeping a close eye on Ford, what he's doing. He's already kind of walking back some of the budget promises that he made. And so I think keeping a close eye on that is going to really fall to reporters more than ever now.
Robert, Sabrina, thank you so much for your insights. Make sure to get some rest.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.